Welcome to the Parenting Different podcast, where we share real adoption stories, have honest conversations, and give hope for the hard days. We're here to encourage parents, build understanding, and make sure that every child is seen, heard, and valued. Welcome to the Parenting Different podcast. My name is Anna Bernacki, and today we have with us Kat Momen. I am so excited to have you with us today. We are going to be talking about how do we make changes in the world of foster care and adoption. We all agree that it's a broken system, but it feels too big and overwhelming. How can just one of us make a difference? And we're going to talk about how you actually can do things and take steps to make a difference. So, Kat, welcome. I am so glad you're here with us. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. And this is one of my passion topics, so I'm super excited to talk a little bit more about that. My name is Kathleen Momen, but I go by Kat. And I live in Indiana, in southern Indiana, with my husband of 15 years. And we have 7 kids, 3 biological and 4 adopted, all through the foster care system. We were active foster parents for 7 years and also had 6 kids reunify. If I could go back and say, like, a lot of times I feel like I'm spinning it on the front end of, like, now we are in adoption phase, but our passion really was working with families and seeing that through to reunification whenever safe and possible. So I don't get to talk about that as much as I would like to because we work more on the difficult ends of foster care, the not so great parts.
Right.
But we are grateful for the 4 that we have through foster care. They are all in open adoptions, and so we navigate that as a family. I'm a music teacher, so I teach 2 evenings a week of piano lessons, and then I co-founded Champions for Children, which is an organization that helps educate foster adoptive parents, citizens, and policymakers in Indiana about what is going on in the child welfare system here and how we can do better. So that is kind of a little bit of a synopsis of me.
I love that. So, how old are your kids now? Because you have, like, how do the ages go? You have
So I
like
have
a biological
almost 10
first
tomorrow.
adopted, or
Yeah, we are our oldest biological kiddo was 15 months old when we started fostering. So she is
wow.
now almost 10. Tomorrow she turns 10. Then we have twin adopted sibling girls who are 3 months
Okay.
older than her biological son. So we call them the triplets.
Wow.
They
Yeah.
we got the twins when they were 11 months old, and our bio son was 8 months old. So they've always kind of just grown up in that triple threat. They are a force. So they're all 6. So
Wow.
yeah, we had Juliet, and then twins, and Rhett is our biological, and then I skipped Leland. That's why I messed up. Leland is 8. So I have 10, 8.
Okay.
He's adopted as well. He was adopted in 2020. The twins were adopted in 2021.
Okay.
Then there's Rhett, and then we have Josie, who's biological. She's 3. And then River, who's also 3. He's adopted, and he's the biological son, or not son, sibling of our older adopted son. We are
Okay. So you
also
have sibling sets as well.
We do, yeah. And that was our passion. So we actually closed our license when we were pregnant with Josie. We had, it was our 6th child. They were all under the age of 6. We felt like we were pretty, well versed in that, right? Ready to be done. And then when Josie was 3 months old, we got the call about River. And they asked us if we would reopen our license and take him. So we did, in order to keep the boys together, which is important to us. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of how he came
That's
along too.
incredible.
So, yep.
Wow. So you have multiples. That's a lot of chaos. So I'll give you credit for managing all that chaos, and you're still thriving. So
Lots
amazing.
of Jesus and
How
coffee.
did So at what point did you decide what kind of brought you to founding this organization that you now run that is really seeking change in the child welfare system?
So we were still actively licensed when we started speaking up more within the system itself, just as foster parents started working within the system and pointing out things about policy. So that probably happened back in, I'd say 2022, maybe 2020. We had gotten involved with one of the siblings of our two adopted sons. They have seven total, actually, biological siblings. And so we have two of them. So we had gotten involved in the case with one of the other siblings, and it had gotten really messy. So that kind of kickstarted a lot of journey into learning more about policy, learning more about law, kind of learning the fact that a lot of judges aren't aware even of what the laws are half the time, that the DCS
Yeah.
attorneys aren't always equipped, especially if there's been legislative change recently. So it just kind of was eye opening getting involved in that case and seeing the amount of chaos that there was and lack of information. So got involved kind of low level there. And then I think it was 2022, there was a bill going forward in Indiana about assigning attorneys for children in foster care. In Indiana, they are not assigned an attorney. So if
Okay.
you know anything about the system, you know that there are different parties of the case. And so here in Indiana, the biological parents are each party to the case. DCS is a party to the case, and CASA is a party to the case. The child is also a party to the case, but they are the only party in Indiana that doesn't have their own legal representation, which is
Wow.
a violation of constitutional rights. If you go back to really that deep dive into the rights of those in the courtroom. So most people will say, the CASA and the GAL are there to do that. That's their role. But most CASAs and GALs are volunteers off the street that have no idea what the law says. So it's not really fair to put them in that position of being a legal advocate. It's very different than being a voice. So you can be a voice, but you can also need a legal advocate. So that's kind of how I first got involved. I went to the state house, heard about this bill, thought, yeah, we need that. This would have been so helpful to have in these cases that we've dealt with, and got invited by my co-founder to come up and testify there. So I did. We teamed up with another couple of foster parents and said, we just think there needs to be some change here. We're not good at sitting on the sidelines. It's not okay. People need to be aware. Citizens need to be aware of this billion-dollar entity in Indiana that is failing so miserably, and what's being done with that money. And so we kind of just hatched it there on the state house floor and started our grassroots stuff. So we operate on zero funds. We're all volunteer based. I run the communications and social media parts. And then I work a little bit with some of the legislators who I have personal relationships with, and I've just built over time. Braylon is the front runner at the State House. She's there pretty much every day during session, knocking down doors and talking to legislators and picking out people to testify and prepping them for testimony. So that's kind of a dive into how we started.
Wow. So you hear that, and I think the average person, I mean, when you're involved in foster care, a lot of this makes sense, right? We all know that we've seen firsthand how broken the system is. We've had it affect our kids. We've seen how the fact that there isn't the representation for the kids, or that it's the wrong, like you said, volunteer. We've had a CASA that I truly believe saved a child's life. And then we've had others that I was like, what are you doing? Like, you are so out of line.
Yeah.
So it really does vary who you end up with, because they are volunteers. And I don't think people realize that a lot of times they are volunteers, and yes, they have training, but some have an agenda, or they don't understand their role and they don't understand laws, and that can create a lot of huge problems.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at this, it's so broken. It's this big thing. Like, even listening to you talk, right? You're going in and banging down doors and like trying to talk to people and advocate. And I'm like, whoa, like that blows my mind. That sounds so overwhelming and so intimidating. And I think to the average person, that is
Mm-hmm.
very intimidating. So when we're sitting here and we're going, this is so broken, but what does little old me do? How can we fix this? Because it feels so wrong to sit and be complacent. Like silence is complicity, but I don't know what to do. How will my voice change anything? So what are some steps that we can take that the average person can get involved in and do?
So I think the biggest thing to starting with is if you're somebody that is not comfortable with conflicting well and professionally, that is a good place to start. So getting some education on learning how to conflict in an appropriate and professional way is ground zero. So I will say the number of my friends in just my in real life circle that I've seen go from like conflict is scary, I don't want anything to do with it, to knowing how to confidently say, like, actually, this is what the policy said. Actually, could you please send that to me in writing? Like those things, from where they were, have allowed them to start with that voice. So, as a first step, I would say learning what that looks like. And if it means like sitting down with somebody who's skilled in that, or just reading some books that talk about how to conflict well, you see somebody in your circle that does this well, grab them and say, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with conflict, I'm really uncomfortable with speaking up, can you help me with some tips on how to do that? So that would be like my first level. One of the things that our organization does, just besides the legislative piece, is really just we get messages constantly from foster parents on the ground with like, hey, DCS broke this policy. Hey, DCS is separating these siblings. Hey, this is happening in our case. What do we do? And, the most discouraging thing for us is when we give advice about speaking up and they refuse to do it. So I think it's becoming that comfort with conflict. And then the second step is getting over the fear of retaliation, because we can't talk about this subject without also addressing that that's a very real thing. So for me, at the end of the day, if that child goes home and it's not an appropriate situation, right, and I didn't speak up, I would feel worse about that than I would feel if I spoke up and they were removed from my home wrongly. Right? Neither is great, but at least I
Right.
did my part in speaking up and getting things in writing and doing the best I could to advocate for the child in my home without letting the fear of removal or retaliation um, get in the way of that. So, yeah, I'd
Yeah,
start
that
with
makes so
learning to
much
conflict. Then I'd move to getting over the fear of retaliation or whatever comes from that, and then getting comfortable with getting things in writing. A lot of people want to do phone calls, and that has become a very triggering and uncomfortable thing for me, because now I'm so used to covering myself in bad situations that I want it all in writing. So if you're one of those people that is like, I can't, I just want to do a phone call, I want to be able to have my tone read better, that's great, but then go back and recap your conversation in writing.
so
So
much sense.
those are some steps I think practically that foster parents could probably take in the middle of an actual case, if that makes sense, with their children. Big
Yeah,
picture
yeah,
level
that makes so much.
is more just um, reaching out and understanding that legislators have no idea what's going on in child welfare. So if you're willing to send an email, then that can go a long way, even if it doesn't go further than that. You would be surprised at the number of legislators that will reach out after an email and say, can we please sit down and talk more about this? Like, I'd really like to understand what exactly is going on here.
Oh,
So I think that's an important piece. They literally just do not know what is happening, and they
yeah,
can't know unless we communicate that. And we've seen it. We've seen, like, okay, when you step into foster care, all of this chaos that is going on is very difficult to describe to people on the outside. So why would we assume
yeah,
that they know, right? They don't. They're just like any other random citizen on the street that doesn't know anything than what the headlines say. You can find your legislator's email address fairly easily. Um, Usually just a quick Google search, If you're in Indiana, there's just a Find Your Legislator. Actually, I think that might be nationwide, like a Find Your Legislator website. And you can just type in
Yeah.
your address and it will give you your state legislator, your House rep, and your federal state or federal rep and senator. You would want to focus
Okay.
more on your state level
Yeah,
people.
that makes sense.
So a lot of people get that confused and will say, like, who do I reach out to? So just make sure it doesn't say like US senator. You want to reach out to your state senator or your state
Right.
representative. And usually that information is fairly easy to find online, as far as shooting a quick email just saying, hey, I've been a foster parent for X amount of years. We've had some good experiences and list some of those, and we've had some really bad ones. And I'd really like to understand, if there's anything in the works to improve our system. Is there anything I can do, boots on the ground, to help the legislators better understand what is going on in the system, and
Yeah.
kind of just go from there and see what happens with the conversation?
Yeah. So I think th- I want to go back to what you said that sometimes legislators will reach out to you and follow up on an email. I think so often we think that it's going into dead space and they never, like, why bother? Kind of. And I know I've felt that too. It's almost the why bother? They're never going to read this anyway. I don't have an important name. So, and they get so many emails, they're not even going to read this. So I think that's very interesting and that's good to know that it's not falling on deaf ears. That doesn't mean that you're guaranteed a response, but at least they are reading these things and they are seeing it. And hopefully you're voting for someone who will read and will care because
It's
that's
an
where a lot
important
of it
piece.
comes from too.
And social media is a
Yeah.
big part of that. I remember one of the interactions I had with a senator, and I was just not getting a response, and I was very frustrated that they just weren't even acknowledging the email. So I went on our local Brown County chatter page and nicely said something of the fact that the child welfare system has some issues, and I'd love for Senator so and so to reach back out to me about it. And you know how fast I got an email back?
That's
So
amazing.
never underestimate the power of social media. You don't have to be nasty and mean, but these people work for
Right.
us.
Very
They
true.
should be ready and
Yes.
willing to sit down and speak about the issues on a state funded system from a taxpayer in their district. So I would say that. And then once you get in that door, it's a lot easier, again, if you're able to have a professional conversation without painting DCS as the enemy. I know that is easy to feel that way, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's very real. But if we can really kind of balance that in our professional conversations, I think that goes a long way too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really important. I mean, I know county by county because I'm in Illinois. So even different counties in Illinois, the judges will or will not allow foster parents in the courtroom. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very specific. But I think it's so important too. Like the judge, I was always allowed in the courtroom and I always went. I wanted that judge to know my face. I wanted them to know that I was showing up and I wouldn't say anything. And the judge actually would not allow any communication from me. It had to go through the state's attorney, and which was fine. But there was a situation that I actually went through CASA was kind of the avenue. I went through CASA to the state's attorney, and it was the only reason that one of the cases ended up kind of turning a corner after some really, really poor decisions on the judge's part. And it was because the facts weren't being given to them. So I think it's really important too. You have to be willing to advocate, even in that, find a way, even in the courtroom. If the judge says, I'm not talking to the foster parent, you find a way to get the message to them. You find somehow, because I could never go to sleep. I mean, she could have removed the kids from my home. She could have kicked me out and said, "You're not allowed in this courtroom ever again." Like there are a lot of things she could have done, but I'm very thankful that, at the end of the day, I had to be less concerned about retaliation and more concerned about what would happen to the child.
Yes.
And at the can I sleep at night knowing I did every single thing?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It's not easy. It's hard because these systems seem so big and some of these people have so much power that it
Mm-hmm.
feels like I used to joke like, well, I'm just the dumb foster parent in this whole thing. That's how you're treated. And it's but the reality is we have these kids in our home every single day and we witness the trauma and we see the effects of that trauma and we see how they are after visits and we know what happens at their doctor's appointments. And all of that matters. It really
Mm-hmm.
matters and we need
Mm-hmm.
to be heard. And I understand why our voice isn't wanted in the courtroom because we can be biased, right? We love those kids and we can be very biased. But when it comes, we should be able to write factual reports or present facts to the people who matter and who are making the decisions.
And I think that's a great thing for especially newer foster parents to look into for their state is how that reporting looks in their state, how it looks for them to be in the courtroom. You know, we've gone a long way in Indiana now. They cannot remove the foster parent from the courtroom. That's some of the stuff
Mm,
we've worked on. The place at the table is going to be valued, period. And so we start small by showing up professionally in the courtroom, by submitting professional court reports. And then when we start getting foster parents for doing those steps, that leads the way for the bigger stuff. Like, hey, we're going to present some legislation on the fact that you can't kick a foster parent out of the hearing, right? And that becomes a more respected thing when we have foster parents showing up and advocating in the courtroom professionally.
right.
So I
Yeah.
think we can all do little things to even pave the way for bigger work. I know it feels like maybe I'm not like, oh, I'm not working on a specific bill or something, but you are paving the way for it becoming a normal thing to be a voice in the courtroom. It becoming a normal thing that the judge would recognize the foster parent and hear their testimony and stuff like that. So I think that is a good way to get involved is just start on that ground level, knowing what you can do it
Yeah.
do it as the best that you can, and it will start to pave a way for bigger and better things.
Yeah. There was one um this is something that I think if you could make it happen, do it. But we had a foster, it was a community support group. This was like pre-COVID and the support group fell apart after COVID, but it was which is unfortunate, but it was really cool. But they actually got our county's judge to come to the support group and she couldn't answer anything case specific, but she could answer general questions. And there were very common themes within the concerns of these foster parents and it was incredible. She seriously, at the end, she was like, I had no clue. She goes, I'm behind the bench. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that this stuff is happening. And so I think even things like that, like invite the judge. They may say no. They may not want to come, but invite the judge to a support group and say, hey, can we do a Q&A with you? Nothing case specific, but can we do a Q&A? And she learned so much, we learned things, and it was such a huge I think it really shifted a lot of things for us. If they are in an area where they cannot be in the courtroom, like there's no laws protecting them, the judge has said no. Um, what are some easy steps that they could do in that case to be able to make sure that their voice is heard?
I think the starting point with that would be to talk to your state rep and state senator and just kind of reach out and say, "Listen, I'm not sure if you knew, but foster parents actually aren't allowed to speak in court or aren't allowed to attend or can get kicked out for any reason. And here's why it matters. Like a lot of times we'll have stories like you mentioned earlier about like things are being left out. So I have a really good one where a case example where things were just being left out of both the DCS report and the CASA report. And so if I did not have the opportunity to speak or write a report, then the judge would not have that information. and the judge makes rulings based on information. They're not God, they can't see everything. They have that information. So explaining to the legislators, like, why is it important that a foster parent, have this information? Because if DCS submits a report, it goes into the record as that is the thing, even if it's not.
Right.
and so and
Right.
so helping the legislators see that and be like, what? Are you kidding me? Would be probably the starting point for me. So
Yeah.
reaching out, getting them to see it, and then they might be like, you know what? That gives me a great idea. I'd like to sponsor a build a session, and I'm going to work on that. Will you come testify? And it kind of goes from there. Or you could just outright ask them, is this something that you would be passionate about sponsoring some legislation on? If not, do you know who is? Because a lot of times, like in the politics kind of world, one person might not be a good fit, but they probably know who is in that arena.
Yeah.
So if it's like a child welfare topic, they know that this person over here has that expertise or that ability to get it through the door, and help you understand the politics side of it. Again, Braylon deals more in the on the boots on the ground politicking than I do, but that is a piece. And I know that she has met individually with people who are interested in going further with their state in kind of writing legislation and working with attorneys and stuff like that to write the stuff. Or you can copy from other states, which is actually a really great way to get bills done. So if you look at another state, you say, I like what they're doing over there, copy paste legislation. What do you think? And then that senator rep can go, oh, that makes it a lot easier for me because I can say they're already doing it.
Yeah.
So just stuff like that and understanding, we can use what we already have in states that are doing a better job in a certain area.
Yeah, for sure. I think the moral of the story, like in everything that we've said, is basically don't take no for an answer. Like
Yeah,
just don't, if
I'm
it
not very good at
involves child
that.
safety, yeah, if it involves child safety, don't accept the no until there are no more avenues to go through. Because it really does make a difference to stand up, and you may be viewed as the crazy foster parents. You may be accused of just trying to keep the kids. You
hmm
may be viewed, but when you can prove, no, this is a safety concern, then you start to gain that credibility.
hmm Yep. And I think sitting down with people too and saying, like, listen, I had 6 kids reunify and I'm in almost all of their lives. My daughter was a flower girl in one of their weddings. We go to every single birthday party. Like, please don't paint me as this anti reunification person. That is not who I am. That is not our family. And if you can come at it from that way too, it gives a better understanding of holding those two things in a balance and saying, listen, we can want child safety as the number one priority and timely permanency as this number one priority while also supporting reunification or adoption, just depending on the individual case. So learning to
Right.
hold those two
And
things and prove that.
exactly. And I think sometimes too, there is this fine line of supporting biological family and also understanding that reunification isn't always the best option. And that is such a fine line to walk. And you have to really make sure that you're checking yourself because it can be really hard. But in supporting, you can support that birth family and develop relationships with that birth family. And that goes a long way too.
A lot of people just, you can get very easily hung up on being liked or being, not seen as a certain type of person. And I think we can balance that. But at the same time, when it comes to child safety, we can't balance that. You should be scared when you open the email from me. You should be like, dang it, not her again. And I want them to be that way because they know that I'm coming at it with every effort to keep that child safe. And they're going to have a heck of a time arguing any bias on that. So I want to hold my credibility in that. And I think everyone can. And I've seen it, like I said, in my personal friends who have entered this space, and it is incredibly uncomfortable for them. They know who they are, but have grown in that and have said, no, child safety is more important than my comfort, than my fear, all of those things.
100%. And I think too, like you said, I don't have to be liked, but I want to be known as a good mom. Like,
Yes.
I'm a good mom. You don't have to like me. We don't have to be friends. We don't have to go out for brunch after court, but I am a good mom, and you're going to know that I'm a good mom.
Yes. And if the biological parents need that too, boy, you better be scared too for that. They're like, you did what? You went to court with them and did what? Well, maybe you should keep the child at the forefront.
Right. Because how many times do we go into court and the child's name isn't even mentioned?
Yeah. Number, case number, JC number. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not even, or they'll just talk to the parents about what the parents are doing. Like, nobody even says, "How are the kids doing? What's going on with the kids?" It's just not even a factor in the case half the time. I think that was one of the most shocking things for me when I first became a foster parent and walked into the court. I was like, "When are we going to talk about these kids?"
Mm-mm.
And we never did.
It's a very parent centric system. And I think that does become an issue with the ways the laws are written, right? Right
Yeah.
now, that is the way a lot of legislation is written, a lot of policy is written. And so slowly making changes to that and not getting discouraged. I mean, it's hard because there's a million things. So just being able to focus in on the one area that you can work on, because every year, at the end of the year, we get messages or comments on our work saying, why didn't you fix this? Why didn't you fix this? Well, you still didn't do this issue. This is still happening. Why didn't you do this? And so, being able to have the tough skin of saying, you know what, we can't do it all in one session. It has to be like a slow roll, and you have
Right.
to be ready to hang in there for a ridiculous amount of time to make change. So, not just don't get discouraged. You have to
Yeah,
do
for
one thing
sure.
at a time. There are good legislators out there who want to help, who want to make a difference, and keeping your eyes on that can help a lot.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Is there any like last words of wisdom that you would give to a foster parent who is in the thick of it, feels like everything is going wrong in their case, and they're very fearful for the child? What would you say to them and help them kind of navigate next steps?
When you're in the thick of a case, really just your focus being on advocating for that specific child. I don't want you to get overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I need to email my senator now. I feel like I'm not doing enough, or any of that. There might be a time in your life where that becomes an option. Now it's the focus of the child in your home and communicating what you can with the people in your case. So I would say get things in writing. Do your best to document and get things in writing. Learn how to find the child welfare policies for your state. Usually there's some kind of search option to help you kind of figure out where things are. Because using policy is a great way to advocate for your kids. And then just, one day at a time, one day at a time. And don't let fear win in its many forms, whether it's being liked or fear of retaliation or feel fear of being seen as a certain kind of person, working to get over that hump of fear in order to advocate the best for your child.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you and your wisdom. I think this is it's something we talk about all the time. Anybody who's involved in the child welfare system, we talk about it. It just is so daunting. So hearing those actionable steps that we can take is refreshing. And I hope that we can all take action and really make a big change. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.